Sometimes the rawest truths hit like a freight train from the tracks you least expect. Senator Rand Paul, the libertarian firebrand who spent years battling his own party's endless wars and blank check spending, just unloaded on national TV. No filter, no prepared remarks, just unfiltered fury at the Republican machine that eased still, funneling billions to Ukraine while ignoring the crumbling borders and empty promises back home. He accused GOP leaders of selling out the base for DC cocktail party invites, calling it a grift disguised as patriotism. Within minutes, the knives came out. Old guard senators whispered about censure, donors pulled funding, and Fox News pundits twisted his words into anti-American. But that's just the spark. On the same day, buried in a bland committee vote, House Republicans quietly approved another $60 billion Ukraine aid package despite Trumpy's fresh mandate and a base screaming for America first. Two seismic cracks, one brutal reality. The Republican Party isn't united under the red banner anymore. It's fracturing into MAGA warriors and country club relics, and the fallout could redefine power in Washington for a generation. Let's peel back the layers on what really went down, why it stings so deep, and what it spells for the fights ahead. We are in the thick of a political drama that feels less like election night and more like a family feud spilling into the streets. For over a decade, the GOP has branded itself as the party of fiscal hawks, strong defense, and putting America first slogans that powered Trump's 2024 landslide, sweeping him back into the White House with bigger margins in the Rust Belt and Sun Belt than anyone predicted. Red hats everywhere, chants of build the wall echoing from Pennsylvania mills to Texas ranches. It was supposed to be a mandate, a clear signal to drain the swamp and redirect the trillions flowing overseas back to fixing potholes, securing borders, and juicing the economy for the forgotten folks who'd carried the torch. But what do you get when the victory parade turns into a backroom brawl? When the heroes of the base start tying each other like suspects in a heist gone wrong? That's the GOP in late 2025, a house divided not by Democrats, but by its own ghosts of endless empire. Enter Rand Paul, the guy who's always been the skunk at the garden party, Kentucky's senior senator, son of a legendary dissenter, with a medical degree sharper than most lawyers' briefs. He's not your typical suit. He's got that rumpled intensity, the kind that makes you lean in because you know fireworks are coming. Paul didn't stumble into this fight, he's been waging it since his first term, filibustering drone strikes, grilling CI directors like they're on the hot seat at a deposition, and vetoing every emergency spending bill that smells like pork. To the MAGA crowd, he's a rock star, the one Republican who actually reads the Constitution like it is a living document, not a coaster for lobbyist scotch. He backed Trump early in 24, stumped in the heartland, and even whispered strategies to slash the deep state during those Mar-a-Lago strategy sessions. But loyalty in Washington? That's a one-way street lined with landmines. Flash back to that electric evening in mid-October, just weeks after Congress reconvened post-summertime recess. The venue, a sold-out forum at the Heritage Foundation in D.C., beamed live on C-SPAN and spliced across YouTube by midnight. The host, none other than Tucker Carlson, fresh off his independent pivot, with that piercing gaze that cuts through BS like a scalpel. The crowd's a mixed boots on the ground, conservatives rubbing shoulders with think tank wonks, all buzzing about the new administration's opening salvos on tariffs and deportations. Carlson doesn't waste time. He lobs the grenade right out of the gate. Senator Trumpson, the people's verdict is clear: America first. So why are your colleagues still writing checks for Zelensky's war machine? Is this the big, beautiful bill you promised, or just more of the same swamp gas? The room hushes. Paulie's no stranger to tough spots. He stared down filibuster marathons that left lesser men wheezing, but this one personal. You can see it in the way his jaw sets, the slight furrow in his brow like he's diagnosing a patient with terminal hypocrisy. He leans into the mic, voice steady but laced with that Kentucky drawl that turns frustration into folksy thunder. Tucker, I've got veterans in my clinics back home who can't get timely care because the VA's budget is a joke. I've got farmers in eastern Kentucky drowning in debt because trade deals gutted their markets. And here we are, about to rubber stamp another $60 billion, yes, billion, for a conflict halfway around the world that has no end game, no victory lap, just an open tab that's already topped $200 billion since 2022. This isn't conservatism. It's cronies in suits laundering taxpayer dollars through Raytheon and Lockheed for kickbacks and board seats. Trump's base didn't vote for this. They voted for walls, not wire transfers to Warsaw. The applause erupts like a dam break, thunderous, sustained, the kind that rattles the rafters. But Paul's not done. He builds it like a surgeon laying out a diagnosis you didn't want to hear. He recounts the closed-door huddles, the ones where McConnelly's whisper network strong arms, holdouts with promises of plum committee spots or veiled threats of primary cash from Koch brothers' dark money packs. I sat in that appropriations room last week, he says, eyes locking on the camera, watching grown men who campaigned on no more forever wars fold like cheap lawn chairs. They talk tough on Hannity, then vote lockstep for the mixed slush fund. Why? Because admitting we're addicted to empire means admitting we've been wrong for 20 years. Afghanistan, Iraq, now this proxy quagmire. But the base sees it. The truckers in Owensboro, the welders in Louisville, they're not buying the spin anymore. They're done subsidizing Europe's defense while our bridges collapse and fentanyl floods our streets. It's the kind of moment that etches into history, raw and unscripted, the senator channeling every sidelined American who's ever felt gaslit by their own team. Paul's not yelling. He's dissecting, layer by layer, with the precision of a man who's audited more budgets than most have hot dinners. He ties it to Trump directly. The president-elect's mandate was crystal end the blank checks, bring the boys home, invest in us. But if we keep this up, we're not just betraying him. We are betraying the millions who turned out in 24 because they believed in a GOP that finally gets it. This Ukraine obsession? It's the establishment's last gasp, a way to cling to the unipolar dream where we're the world's ATM and cop, wake up America's tired of playing global sugar daddy. The crowd's on its feet now, but you could hear the DC echo chamber grinding its teeth from blocks away. By morning, the backlash wasn't a wave. It was a tsunami. McConnell's office leaked memos framing Paul as isolated and endangering allies. Lindsey Graham, the South Carolina hawk who flipped from Trump's skeptic to sycophant faster than a weather vane in a gale, took to the Senate floor with a stem winder about putting Putin over patriotism. Even some MAGA darlings like Metigi hedged, tweeting vague nods to strategic aid that smelled like fresh paint over old cracks. And the donors? Oh, they moved like sharks to blood. Reports trickled out from Politico and named bundlers halting six-figure checks to Paul's super PAC, whispers of a unity caucus to sideline libertarians in the 26 midterms. It's the GOP playbook, praise the base in primaries, then ice the purists when the gavels fall. But here ease the poetry and the pain, the party that rode Trump ease outsider rage to victory can't stomach, one of its own senators echoing that same rage when it points inward. The GOP, for all its drain, the swamp bravado, has always harbored this fault line, the Chamber of Commerce crowd versus the chambermaid son, the think tank. Strategists versus the truck stop philosophers. Paul's moment wasn't a tantrum. It was a mirror, held up to a reflection the establishment would rather shatter, and it landed because it eased true Ukraine aid has ballooned into a $175 billion behemoth by fall 25, with audits from the Pentagon's own Inspector General flagging billions in unaccounted funds, ghost projects, and contracts funneled to Beltway. Insiders. Trump's team had signaled a pivot, conditional support tied to NATO burden sharing, with strings attached to domestic priorities like border tech and veteran housing. Yet there, in the bowels of the Capitol, a block of 40-odd Republicans holdovers from the Romney-McCain era quietly greenlit the full package, no offsets, no audits, just another IOU to Kyiv. To grasp the gut punch, you have to zoom out to the human stakes, the stories that don't make the chirons but fuel the fury. Picture this. In Rand Paul's Louisville district, a single mom named Carla, working double shifts at a warehouse that's one bad quarter from shuttering. Her boy's got asthma flares that land him in the year monthly. But the local clinic's waitlist is 6 weeks because federal grants got rerouted to strategic partnerships overseas. Carla voted Trump Paul's straight ticket, not out of blind faith, but because she heard promises of trade protections and healthcare weeks that actually work. Now, scrolling her feed, she sees another aid vote pass while her rent spikes 15% and Border Patrol agents beg for drones that never arrive. We're funding their fight, she texts a friend, while mine's just trying to breathe. Multiply Carla by millions, the coal miners in eastern Kentucky eyeing automation, the Florida retirees, watching Medicare premiums climb as foreign aid swallows the surplus. Paul's rant wasn't abstract. It was their voice, amplified in a chamber that too often mutes it, and it ties straight to that committee vote, the one that slipped under the radar like a shadow op on the same day Paul scorched the earth on Carlson's stage. The House Foreign Affairs panel stacked with blue-chip Republicans like Mike McCall of Texas pushed through. H.R. 712, the Ukraine Security Enhancement Act of 2025, buried in the fine print, $60 billion fresh, including $20 billion in flexible drawdowns for weapons that critics like Paul slammed as a blank check for black ops. No debate on the floor, no town halls back home, just a voice vote at dusk when C-SPANs. Audience thins two insomniacs and aides, the reasoning from leadership. Strategic necessity, they cooed, echoing Biden-era talking points about deterring Russian aggression, but peel it back. McCall's district hosts Raytheon plants employing thousands. Graham's got defense firms in his backyard. It's not just policy, it's an ecosystem, a web of revolving doors where ex-staffers lobby for the next tranche, and patriotism pays the mortgage. Law enforcement sees the ripple too, the way this foreign fixation starves domestic fronts. Take the southern border. Trump's day one executive orders ramped up deportations, but ICE field offices are starved for vehicles, surveillance gear, even basic manpower budgets siphoned to Eastern European logistics. Agents in Laredo told reporters off record, "We're chasing ghosts in the desert while Kyiv gets satellite intel we can't afford." cartel violence spikes, migrant crossings hit record Q for numbers despite the wall push, and small-town sheriffs in Arizona plead for federal backup that arrives in dribs. Paul's point lands hardest here when you prioritize proxy battles 5,000 miles away over the invasion at your doorstep. You're not defending freedom. You're diffusing it, letting threats metastasize because the map on the wall distracts from the one under your feet. This isn't some fever dream conspiracy. It's the arithmetic of empire run amok. The Congressional Budget Office dropped a bombshell report that week, pegging cumulative Ukraine outlays at $212 billion more than the annual discretionary spend on housing and community development combined, and the returns? Stalemate in Donbas, with U.S.-supplied HIMARS gathering dust in depots amid corruption scandals that make Chicago wards look pristine. Zelensky's own auditors admitted to $40 million in irregularities last quarter alone, yet the spigot stays open. Paul's meltdown crystallized the betrayal. The base that stormed the gates for Trump expected a reckoning, not a remix of neoconservative greatest hits. He didn't mince words on the human cost. Every dollar we wire to warlords is a dollar not rebuilding Detroit or desalination plants in drought-struck Cali. This grift ends when we choose our neighbors over NATO photo ops. You feel the emotional weight in his delivery, the way his voice cracks just a hair on neighbors, a nod to the Kentucky kin he's fought for since med school days. Patching up coal miners black, lunged from jobs shipped overseas. It's that authenticity that hooks you, the sense he's not performing but confessing, like a brother calling out the family business for cooking the books, and the audience. They didn't just clap. They roared, because in a sea of scripted sound bites, Paul's the rare bird who speaks in full sentences, backing fire with footnotes, but courage like that, it costs. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in machine politics, anonymous op-eds in the Wall Street Journal branding him a Kremlin-useful idiot, a donor summit in Dallas where RNC brass floated libertarian purity tests for 26 candidates. Even Trump, usually quick with a retweet lifeline, stayed mum, perhaps wary of alienating. The Senate old bulls needed for judicial noms. The irony twists the knife deeper. The party that weaponized America first to crush Hillary, then Biden, now treats its own apostle of restraint like a pariah. GOP leadership preaches unity but practices purge censoring dissenters faster than big tech ever dreamed. It's the same rigidity that doomed the Democrats' blue wall. When ideology calcifies into idolatry, whether it's endless wars or identity checklists, the center hollows out. Paul's not alone. Polls from Gallup that month showed 62% of Republicans under 45 prime MAGA demos want Ukraine aid capped or cut, versus just 28% of those over 65, the country club cohort clinging to Cold War catechisms. The fracture's generational, geographic, heartland hawks versus coastal consultants, podcasters versus beltway briefings. Layer on the media's sleight of hand, and the picture sharpens to a stiletto. Take Fox's primetime spin. They aired Paul's clip, sure, but sandwiched between ads for defense contractors and segments gushing over bipartisan resolve. Brett Baer followed up with a panel where establishment guests like Karl Rove dismissed it as Paul being Paul, while MAGA voices got the short end 5 minutes to 20 of why we can't abandon allies. Contrast that with MSNBC's Glee. They looped the rant as GOP imploding, but zeroed in on the donor pullback, framing it as even Republicans turning on their own. Its narrative judo amplify the chaos to discredit the critique, keep viewers hooked on division without dissecting the dollars. No deep dives on the CBO numbers, no graphics. Tracing Raytheon PAC contributions to McConnell's war chest. Instead, it's vibes. Paul's meltdown becomes the story, not the money trail it exposed. This filtering isn't accidental. It's industrial, post-24, with Trump's win validating outsider energy. Legacy outlets doubled down on both sides ism that favors the status quo. When Paul's truth bomb fits the GOP Civil War trope, it gets clicks without consequence, endless chirons, but no follow-ups on the aid votes passage when it threatens the donor class. Skepticism surges. Is Paul coordinating with isolationists abroad? Never mind, he cited declassified intel showing European allies shorting their 2% pledges by $100 billion. It's the same playbook that soft-pedaled the Afghanistan withdrawal debacle or the border surge stats. Question the messengers, bury the metrics, let the machine hum on. Yet Paul's stand resonated beyond the Beltway echo, piercing the heartland like a clarion. Independents in swing Ohio nodded along, weary of $34 trillion in debt. Where half the interest payments could fund universal pre-K, disillusioned vets in Paul's own VFW halls bought him beers, sharing tales of buddies lost in forever wars that bought nothing but grief. Even some blue dog Dems, like Montana's John Tester, murmured private agreement rare cross-sell nods in a town built on binaries. Why? Because most Americans are ideologues. They're pragmatists clocking in at dawn, tuning out the extremes for fixes that stick. They crave leaders who audit the books, not burn them, who say enough to empire when the pantry's bare. Paul's not preaching revolution. He's demanding arithmetic, the kind your dad taught over the dinner table. Dollars in, results out, no IOUs. What does this symbolize in the grander chessboard? Paul's become an unlikely beacon for the politically adrift, the Trump voters who flipped Georgia not for glory, but for guardrails. The suburban dads in Virginia suburbs eyeing midterms with buyer's remorse. The young conservatives on Barstool Sports feeds, done with dad jokes about winning so much, will get tired. He's the bridge from MAGA's roar to a reformed GOP, one that fuses fiscal knives with foreign doves. History whispers warnings here. Parties that purge their profits think Goldwater eased Barryites in 64 or the Dems McGovern wing in 72 don't just lose elections. They lose eras, innovation dies in echo chambers. Progress demands the grit of gadflies like Paul, willing to filibuster their own for the greater math, zoom to the patterns and the peril mounts. That aid vote wasn't isolated, it's the third Ukraine tranche since inauguration 25, each ballooning despite Trump's veto threats. Tie it to domestic voids. Border apprehensions up 22% in Q3 per CBP data, with cartel profits hitting $15 billion on U.S. soil. Fentanyl deaths stopping 100,000 annually, a silent war we fund indirectly by starving ICE. Vet suicide rates climb as VA wait times stretch, while $12 billion in humanitarian. Ukraine funds vanish into NGO black holes. Paul's calculus is merciless. We're borrowing from Chinese lenders to arm Ukrainians against Russians, while our kids inherit the bill and our allies freeload. It's not anti-Ukraine. It's pro-American sequence: secure the homeland first, then calibrate the charity, the establishment's counter. Obedience over originality. Whispers of a McConnell succession plan grooming loyalists like John Thune for majority leader, with purity pledges on core alliances. They're scouting 26 primaries already, targeting Paul allies like Massey's Thomas in Kentucky bluegrass districts. But voters? They're the wild card. Post-rant polls from Morning Consult showed Paulie's favorables spiking 18 points among GOP base, now 72%, while McConnell's cratered to 41%, even in red Kentucky. Republicans in flyover states aren't asking party lines anymore. They're demanding receipts. Did you cut the waste? Secure the line? Or just pose for the parade? This realignment brews slow but seismic. Imagine 26 midterms. A GOP House majority tests Trump's agenda tax cuts, energy dominance but stalls on foreign pullbacks, birthing a Liberty Caucus of Paul-inspired insurgents challenging Reno redoubts in Colorado and Maine. Independents, 40% of the electorate per pew, flock to authenticity, eroding the old guard's grip. Blue states like Nevada see crossover appeal, where Latino voters prioritize walls over Warsaw. It's not chaos. It's churn, the kind that birthed Reagan's fusionism or Clinton's triangulation. If the machine doubles down, punishing Paul as disruptive, it risks a base exodus to third-way pods like Ofc's lingering network or Musk's sex-fueled populism. But here's the deeper quake. We're witnessing twin erosions, political and principled. The GOP's fracture mirrors a moral drift where strong on defense morphs into strong on spreadsheets for special interests, and victory speeches curdle into veto-proof vendettas. When power trumps prudence, the foundation phrase, disagree without demonizing, or watch the center splinter. Paul's act wasn't rebellion. It was reclamation, a surgeon excising the rot before it spreads. Respect it, even if you cheer the hawk's courage like his is the oxygen of democracy, rare as hen's teeth in a town of tacticians. You've navigated tempests before .com busts, endless wars, pandemics that upended the ordinary, empires overextend, parties pivot or perish, principles like thrift, sovereignty, candor. They're the North Star, unyielding amid the squalls. So carry this forward, scrutinize the suits by their spreadsheets, not slogans. Demand the audit trail on every must-pass bill. Speak your piece, even if it ruffles the roost. Silence suits the swamp, not the sovereign. And engage the edges, question the feed, chase the facts, because the insiders bet on your apathy. Paul's saga spotlights the spark. One voice can ignite the audit, rally the restless, reroute the river, but it's a siren to the machine's gears grind descent to dust, from donor droughts to media mirages. If you hold that America deserves leaders who balance the books before burning the midnight oil abroad, who put ports over proxies, and people over pageantry, hit like, share this with a skeptic in your circle, and subscribe. The next revelation might just redraw the map. The arena's shifting, and the only compass that counts is the one pointing true north toward a republic rebuilt on reality, not rhetoric. Thanks for tuning in, for thinking deep, for fighting smart. In this game, truth's the ultimate checkmate.